I'm in awe of Noval Nacional, I always have been. I probably get to taste it more often than most people here, and so it's almost an embarrassment of riches to taste it again.
Because the Nacional has a curious characteristic, which is that it just decides to be great when it wants to be great, and when it doesn't decide to be, there's nothing much we can do about it. It comes from, as you all know, this tiny parcel of 2 hectares of ungrafted vines at the heart of the vineyard, and it always gives something that is different from what comes from the rest of the vineyard.
I think we tend to talk about port as if it was in a category of its own, and of course it is in a way, but I think the problem is that we think of it almost as something apart from wine. We don't think of it as quite the same category, and it's just great wine. And Noval, and especially the Nacional, are the very greatest wines that I've ever tasted, and it's just thrilling to taste the vintage and the Nacional together, to see the differences between the two, to see how they're evolving since Christian took over 20 years ago now, and just such a rare opportunity to taste the two together. They're very thrilling.
Because I think the 2011 Nacional in particular is an extraordinary wine. But I think the same about the 94 as well, so I think it would be perfectly alright to finish on the 94. But the 2011 vintage Quinta Noval, I think is a great Quinta Noval vintage, but I do think this is an outstanding Nacional.
I mean, this morning was a unique occasion. I mean, I hesitate to use the word unique because it's overused, a bit like the word literally, but I think the wines were really very exciting. We actually had a bit of a scoop this morning in that we saw a not yet released vintage of Nacional. But really, it was a chance to compare and contrast the two. So you're looking at the, I hesitate to use the word basic, but the basic wine with something that's very, very special and small in size. And so we compared and contrasted various vintages of the two wines. And we had pairs in most cases, which was really interesting. So you can actually see whether 11 was great, whether 2000, which I thought was underrated, was rather wonderful, and whether 94 was possibly slightly overrated, and whether 97 was as great as everybody said, and I think it was. So it was a fascinating insight into two different wines, one of which is a smaller part of the other. It's a bit like a kind of Russian doll in that sense.
So my knowledge of that wine has increased exponentially today, and there were no disappointments. It was lovely to see them next to the regular Quinta de Noval vintage ports of the same vintages, and it was quite a treat to have a look at the undeclared 2004.
I would say that I feel incredibly privileged to have the opportunity to taste, this amazing range of wines, and especially to taste the Noval and the Nacional side by side, and especially given the tiny bottle quantities left of some of these wines, it's really is a privilege.